What's up, everyone? Aaron Nagler here for PackersNews.com, live on Facebook late in the afternoon / early evening on Tuesday. Not a ton of news, but a few dribs and drabs, as one of my friends likes to say. Devontae Adams headed to the Pro Bowl in lieu of Julio Jones, who is dropping out due to injury, and Darren Perry, the safeties coach for the Packers, who still is under contract in Green Bay, interviewing down in Houston for the secondary job down there, but that has not come to anything as of yet. The reported interview happened earlier today, but Perry could still be back with the Packers. And those are your two headlines. Not a ton of news. Still waiting for Mike McCarthy to fill out the remainder of his defensive coaching staff, possibly a spot on the offensive staff as well. But I thought I'd jump on because I said I would. In lieu of any big, huge breaking news, still like to chat it up with you guys and see what's up and see what's on your minds as the Packers wait for the rest of the postseason to unfold without them, and then head straight into, most of their scouting staff is already headed right into bowl season and all-star game season, East-West Shrine game practices going on, NFLPA Bowl, all those things gearing up. And then, of course, the Senior Bowl, and then the Combine. So the work never stops. No one wants to play in the Pro Bowl. Timothy, yeah, some guys do. Some guys love it. Some guys love the kind of vacation aspect of it. And the game is a lot of fun. And obviously they don't exactly do a whole lot of hitting anymore. They used to back in the day. But some guys do. But a lot of guys, yeah, especially the frontline guys, it's been a long season. If they even have any kind of injury whatsoever, they usually do tend to drop out. Play something acoustic. Nobody wants that. Do you think Rodgers will leave? Yes, Colby. Richard Rodgers, there's a good possibility that he will leave. Do you mean Aaron Rodgers? Because no, he's not going anywhere. Chris, that's where you're wrong. Chris Gibbs saying nobody wants to watch the Pro Bowl. Funnily enough, it still kills in the ratings. Every Monday morning after they do the Pro Bowl, I think, okay, this is the year that nobody watches. And every year, it is still the most watched thing on television the night that it airs. Or one of. It's always in the top 3 at least. That's why they haven't done away with it. People are always talking about how they have to fix the Pro Bowl. They don't have to fix anything. People are still watching it. It's crazy. How do you feel about the new defensive coordinator? Mike, I think it's a fantastic hire. I think Penton is a really sharp defensive mind. I am interested to see how they fill out his staff. But yeah, I'm all in, so to speak, on the initial hire. Now we'll see how it plays out, what kind of pieces they give him on the defensive side of the ball as far as free agency and the draft, but I think he's a really good coach, and I think it's a strong hire for McCarthy. Aaron Rodgers doesn't have to sign with Green Bay. Michael, he's under contract for 2 more years. So you're right, he doesn't have to sign an extension, but he's not going anywhere for 2 more years. And after that, the Packers can put the transition tag on him. So he doesn't have a whole lot of options. I know the doom and gloom crowd is really trying to rev it up that Aaron Rodgers might leave, but sorry, Aaron Rodgers isn't going anywhere. Who's my pick for the Super Bowl? Matthew, I've got the Eagles and the Patriots. Now, when I say the Patriots, it's simply because I cannot pick against Bill Belichick and Tom Brady in their own house in the playoffs. Just can't do it. But I will say, I am really looking forward to that game, and I do think the Jaguars match up really well. Obviously, a big part of it will be Blake Bortles being able to minimize whatever mistakes he might make, because he's going to make them against Bill Belichick and company. And it's also going to count on that Jaguars defense producing a turnover or 2, much like they did against Pittsburgh. But I tell you what, they're going to come up there, and between their defense and that running game, they have a shot. They definitely have a shot. A much better one than I think a lot of people are maybe giving them credit for. But and then on the other matchup, I think the Vikings, obviously the defense is there, but that offense, I'm telling you, man, you go and watch how they performed in the cold in Green Bay in Week 15 or Week 16. Sorry, And then you look forward to the forecast there in Philadelphia. It's going to be cold. And it's not like they were lighting the world on fire. And Philadelphia has a much, much better defense than Green Bay does. So, I tell you what, I know Nick Foles is no great shakes, but if he plays just in his comfort zone like he did against Atlanta, I think that's Philadelphia's game to win. What was Marcus Williams doing? Having a brain fart at the worst possible time. Patriots being so good makes the NFL an inferior product. I don't think so. I mean, no one was complaining when the Bulls were so good back in the day. I mean, I know I wasn't. Go get Eli Apple and hope for the best? Don, that's a good question. The talent is there, no doubt about it. But all that off-field stuff, all the off-field drama, man, that's a lot to take on. And it will be interesting to see how Gutekunst kind of treats those situations. Obviously, it's a big difference between scouting a guy. Although they do, scouts do look at on and off the field stuff. But it's very different when you're just writing it up as opposed to having to make the call as to whether or not to bring a guy in. I would be surprised if they made that move, but I wouldn't dismiss it out of hand. Chris, what's up, man? Apple and Randall, ugh. Keith, I get why some Packer fans seem to rub Demarius Randall rubs them the wrong way. Heck, some of my colleagues in the media, he also does the same. But man, that kid, he's as confident can be, and he really turned it around this year. There's no denying that after he got benched that Thursday night against Chicago, that guy only played better and better throughout the year till, I tell you what, the last month and a half of the season, he was playing some really good football. Now, I'm not here to tell you he's Deion Sanders in his prime or anything, but he's a pretty darn good football player from what he put on film that last quarter of the season. If he can continue doing that for the rest of his career, or at least the next couple of years, man, he can crow all he wants, and he can be as brash as he wants to be. That's one of the toughest positions in the NFL to play, and he was playing it at a high level there, the last 4 or 5 games. So, man, I get it. If you don't like his personality, you don't like the kind of brashness, I understand. I don't have any problem with it. I really don't. I mean, it takes all kinds, right? Is signing a good backup QB a top 5 priority? I don't know about top 5 priority, but I do think it is something they have to look at. I think they've got to bring in some competition for Brett Hundley. I don't think they're going to let Hundley go, although, I wouldn't dismiss it out of hand. But I do think they have to bring in some competition, whether that is through free agency or through the draft. I would tend to think it would be through free agency, but you never know. But yes, I think they have to, try to improve the backup quarterback spot heading into next season. Graham Mukamura and a safety, fixed pass rush in the draft, as well as receivers and another quarterback to compete with Hundley. There you go. You fixed the offseason. Well done. I can just stop right now. What do you think of the Packers trading up in the draft for an explosive offensive piece like Barkley? Well, I tell you what, that would be the antithesis of the Ted Thompson way, but with Gutekunst at the helm now, we don't know. I guess it's a possibility. I would be surprised, just because the Packers, going all the way back to Ron Wolf, have really not kind of placed a major priority at the running back spot when it comes to draft ammunition. But if it is a special player and they think he could be a potential game changer / kind of field tilter, maybe. I tend to think they would maybe make that move for a defensive piece, but you never know. It really depends on their evaluation and what they think about the value of giving up picks to go get him. What do you think of Geronimo Allison? I like his size and chemistry with Rodgers. He's really hit and miss for me. I think he's really talented. You can see why Rodgers likes throwing to him. He still makes a lot of mental errors. I was actually just watching him, some of his cut-ups today. There's a number of times where it sure seems like he's reading things incorrectly. Now, you can't really know that because you don't know the play call and you don't know the adjustments at the line of scrimmage. But if I'm going to err on, I think Rodgers was right or Allison was right, more often than not, I'm going to think Rodgers was right. It sure seems like he was off a number of times this year. Now, there may be other circumstances at play there, but I do, like I said, I do think he's talented, and I do think he has a place in the league. I'm not sold on he's the heir apparent to Jordy Nelson outside, which I've seen kind of bandied about the internet for the last kind of year. I think he's a good complementary piece, but I would never think of him as a frontline guy, at least not yet. Alshon Jeffrey a possibility? I don't think so. Rick, I think he signed an extension in Philadelphia. Doug Farrar said McCarthy's offensive playbook is outdated. Do you agree? That's a really good question. First of all, you got to remember, Doug Farrar has never missed an opportunity to bash Mike McCarthy's playbook. It's one of his favorite hobbies, one of his favorite pastimes. We all have them. We all have our bugaboos. This happens to be one of Doug's. I do think McCarthy needs to do a little bit more in regards to adapting some of the concepts and things he likes to do on offense, which are very productive. Obviously when Aaron Rodgers is the one pulling the trigger and at the helm, the possibilities are endless for what you can draw up. I would only caution. Now, and I know Doug doesn't need to hear it from me. Doug's been doing this a long time. I've been reading him since he was at Football Outsiders. I consider him a friend. But I would only caution that a lot of times Mike McCarthy's playbook or the play design is set and sound, and when run, you can see the X's and O's on the field working perfectly, working fine. But there are a lot of times, and I'm not saying like this is once or twice, like there are a lot of times when there are free crossers, free guys out in the flat, easy rhythm throws that Rodgers turns down in favor of escaping out of the pocket and trying to make a bigger play. And now that's not, and I'm not bashing Rodgers here. That's his game. That's who he is. It's what he does. It's what he's done for years. And the Packers have been very productive and scored a lot of points because of it. But this criticism of McCarthy's playbook, which I see a lot, doesn't ever seem to take into account that the quarterback has some say in this. And the quarterback's style also plays into, people say, well, McCarthy just has them run isolation routes and then Rodgers runs around. Well, yeah, because Rodgers is not taking the easy throw a lot of the time. Now, there are times, no doubt, and you've seen these pictures all across the internet, because this is what people do when they're criticizing McCarthy. They take these isolated shots and moments and say, well, look, there are these deep developing routes, the receivers are all covered, and Rodgers has to run around. Yes, on that play, you're probably right. But I can also show you plenty of instances where there's a low crosser, shallow crosser, guy in the flat, easy flare out from the tight end, etc., 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 that Rodgers turns down and then just runs around and tries to find something deeper. Sometimes he does successfully. Sometimes he has to throw it away. Sometimes he throws it, the tight end drops it, and he breaks his collarbone. These are the things that happen. But that's the only thing I would say when talking about Mike McCarthy's playbook and it being outdated. I think there's tons of stuff in there that they do that doesn't get kind of recognized and or given the kind of kudos it should. That's all I'll say. What do you think McCarthy needs to do this season what do you think he needs to accomplish this season to cool down the proverbial hot seat? That is a good question. I was listening to my colleagues Michael Cohen and Tom Silverstein talking about the coaching changes on their podcast, which you should all listen to. It's at PackersNews.com. And they were talking, I think Michael specifically was asking, what does McCarthy have to do? And is there a possibility that maybe Murphy moves on from McCarthy? Because it's Murphy's call now. If they even, they have a quote-unquote successful season, say they go 10-6 and lose in the wild card round, or even win a wild card game and lose in the divisional round, could they possibly move on from McCarthy, even if they do, that? And I tell you what, I think a large part of it is going to be how they play and how they look on both sides of the ball. And the ebbs and flow of the season, obviously every NFL season has its twists and turns, but if they, come out of the gate hot and then fizzle, or if they come out of the gate stumbling and never really find their way, but they kind of stumble into the playoffs, that's very different than, they come out, win a bunch of games, get really hot at the end of the year, go into, the playoffs humming, win a game, and then run into a buzzsaw in a bad matchup in the playoffs. Say in Atlanta. That's been their kind of bugaboo the last couple of years, obviously. I think it really depends on, the optics around their play next season. And that sounds weird to say, but I don't think there's any doubt. You look at Murphy and his change of heart when it comes to the power structure in Green Bay, where one week he's saying, yes, the GM's going to have the power to hire and fire the coach, to the next week saying, oh, by the way, no, that was incorrect. I'm going to hire and fire the coach, and we've got a whole new power structure. If that's, as quickly and as easily as his mind can be changed, and I can only take the man at his word, he's, he hasn't come on my podcast yet, so I haven't been able to ask him, but, I have to think a lot of it is going to have to do with, how the team's performing and how it looks and how it feels. And that's not something I can put my finger on or anybody else can. That's going to be up to Mark Murphy. If the Vikings win the Super Bowl, you have to grow out your mustache, Tom Selleck style. Mike, no chance. McCarthy's contract tied to sledding revenue. That's good. When are we going to hear from Mike Pettin? This week? That's a good question. I know he still doesn't have a defensive line coach. There's still a couple of coaching spots on the staff they need to solidify. So I would tend to think it's going to be another week yet, probably. They're maybe possibly waiting to talk to one or two guys that are on some of the staffs that are still playing. That's always a possibility. I did ask the Packers earlier today, actually, if they are going to make everyone available, Mike Pettin, Joe Philbin, etc. And I was told that they are going to have a press conference / availability for all the new guys prior to the combine. So it's coming. I would tend to think probably next week, maybe this week. We'll see. But they will be having some kind of introductory media availability. How is the wide receiver core going to shake out for next year? Gabriel, that's a good question, a topical question since that's been all over my Twitter feed today. Really hard to say until we see, I would say, at least the beginning of the new league year when free agency begins. Because if Nelson and or Cobb aren't asked to take some kind of pay reduction / asked to restructure their contracts, obviously it's a good bet that they'll still be around. Either way, I think. But if they are kind of moved, their salary cap money is moved around and their cap hits are mitigated, maybe the possibility is there that they do something in free agency. I don't expect that. But again, it's really hard to answer these questions without having any kind of track record to draw from with their new general manager. I mean, Gutekunst could surprise us all and cut Jordy Nelson, go sign somebody in free agency and draft somebody in the first round and completely, change the dynamics of the wide receiver spot. Do I think that particular scenario is going to happen? No. But it could. We don't know. I have no idea how this guy's going to operate. So for the first time in a long time, it's going to be very hard to predict the moves coming out of 1265 Lombardi. Damon, do you live in Green Bay? No, I do not. I live in New York City. I fly to all the games. I go to the draft. Or actually now I go to Green Bay for the draft. And I go to the combine. But I do not live in Green Bay. No, sir. Oh, why was Turkovac fired? Thought D-line played okay. Kevin, that is an excellent question. And I've asked around and nobody will talk. I suspect there was a feeling of maybe complacency on the defensive side of the ball with some of those coaches. You saw Turkovac and McCurley were let go on the same day. Like I said, no one will talk. No one will say anything to me, especially not on the record. But I just get the feeling that McCarthy really wanted to shake it up over there. He knew he was going to fire Dom Capers. And, Turkovac's been around a long time. And I think he just wanted to give those guys maybe a quick kick in the pants, so to speak. And I'm with you. I think the D-line did play well for the most part. I But I think part of that is just wanting to get a new voice and maybe a bit of complacency. McCarthy thought maybe a little bit of complacency had set in. Why is Zook still around? Steve, I get this question a lot, and, I understand, clearly the special teams have never been the Green Bay Packers calling card under Ron Zook or anybody else. But, look, man, Justin Vogel came in as an undrafted free agent and punted really well for the most part throughout the year. You look at coverage unit wise, they performed pretty darn well this year, especially in punt coverage. And then, obviously there's Trevor Davis and the Adventures back there. But for the most part, given the fact that he has a billion young guys coming through each and every week, different guys up and down every week, different responsibilities, game in and game out, injuries, wreaking havoc with his lineups every single game. Man, I don't know. It's a tough gig. And I thought Ron Zook did okay this year. Now, I'm not saying he was out there, like he was John Harbaugh back in the day, but I thought he did a pretty good job. Why haven't Packers made coordinator hires official? Most likely because they're waiting to fill out the staffs. And then when they do, they will make an announcement. Mark Murphy confirmed the Joe Philbin and Mike Pettine hires on the radio last week. So those are definite. It's just a question of filling out one or two spots left on the staff, and then they'll do so. Special teams were not the issue. Yeah, I would agree. Will Packers draft Oklahoma punter kicker back up to Crosby? I doubt it, but you never know. Raji spotted at Stadium View with nachos. These chats are the best. Do you think Gutekunst will pick our biggest need or best possible player in the 2018 NFL Draft? That is a great question. My hunch is greatest need, because I think he will view the Packers, much like I think I do, as being a lot closer than people think to contending again in 2018. Now, again, that's just a hunch. He could very well follow his board and take the best available player, even if it's a position of strength on their roster already. But you never really know. I mean, remember, Ted Thompson, you never met a man who preached best player available more than Ted Thompson. And yet, when push came to shove, back in the day when B.J. Raji was available and Michael Crabtree was still on the board, and as Bob McGinn reported, Michael Crabtree was the top-rated player on their board, they still took B.J. Raji because they were transitioning to a 3-4 and they desperately needed someone to play in the middle. So, you never know. Guys can have philosophies and stick to them, etc., until it's time to break them. So, I do tend to think he'll go for the biggest need early on, just because, like I said, I think this team is close, but only time will tell. Does Favre want to coach at all? Sean, I know he jokes about it, but I've talked about it here before. I would be absolutely shocked if he really kind of wanted to put in the hours, wanted to grind like a coach needs to grind. I mean, it's a tough life. It is a tough life. People don't appreciate how hard NFL coaches work and how often and how long. It's close. I'll say it's a miserable life for the most part. But guys do it because they love it. Guys do it because they're absolutely 1,000,000,000% in love with football. And I tell you what, the last few kind of public comments from Brett Favre, it sounds like he's really having questions about his love for football and about his playing days and what concussions may have done to him and or are doing to people who play the game. So, yeah, I don't know. If you ask me, does Favre really want to coach? No, I don't think so. He coaches high school, Favre. Christopher, he did. He was an offensive coordinator, but I don't think he does that anymore. Is Richard Rodgers out? Gabriel, he's set to be a free agent, but he could be re-signed any day if they so choose. He did suffer the injury later in the year there, but I think it's a possibility that they bring him back. But the tight end position is one that they have to address and they have to kind of overhaul. And does that mean bringing Richard Rodgers back? I don't know. I think they probably want to try and get better at the position, and I'm not sure bringing him back accomplishes that. But you also need role players, and you also need guys who know your system. And Richard Rodgers obviously knows the system and has a fantastic pair of hands. So, maybe. Will Jeff Janis be back? I suspect he will be. I can't imagine he's going to find a great offer out in the market. Now, maybe he does, but I suspect the Packers will most likely allow him to test free agency and then bring him back on a bit of a, veteran, maybe just above the veterans minimum. I mean, he's always going to be a special team stalwart in Green Bay. I don't think he's ever going to crack the regular rotation. Kind of a break glass in case of emergency when it comes to the wide receiver position. But he's an excellent special teams player, and that would be his place in Green Bay. Need a Julio-type receiver. Yeah, so do 31 other teams, or 30 other teams. I mean, there's a reason the Falcons had to give up a boatload of draft capital to go get him. He's a special once-in-a-lifetime player. I'm excited to see what is in store for us. Tim, I am excited as well. Nick Perry or Sledding Hill, bigger waste of money? Oh, Chase, that is rough, man. You guys are tough. Tough crowd. I'll go with Sledding Hill. How about that? Do you play guitar? Please in the background. Is there a guitar in the background? No. That's my daughter's guitar, actually. Nobody wants to hear me play guitar. I can play I Feel You by Depeche Mode, the lead line, only because it's 2 notes. How do you keep up with all the Packers news living in New York? That's the beauty of the internet, man. We never go up and get the best players in the draft. Yeah, that's true. They're never truly aggressive, or they haven't been under Ted Thompson. You don't know how Brian Gutekunst is going to run the draft, but, Ted Thompson did jump up and get Clay Matthews, who was a transformational player for their defense, so can't say they never do it. They jumped up and got Jason Spriggs. That hasn't worked out so well. Bye-bye House. I do tend to think if this team is serious about getting better on defense, they have to move on from Devon House. He's a serviceable player, fine role player, but with Randall and King, they need probably one more piece there, and I don't think Devon House is the answer. Let's see. Will you be on location at the draft? No, Tim, I will not be in Dallas. I will be in Green Bay because all the guys, as far as on the Packers end, are all there at Lambeau. And we get media availability and stuff like that, so I'll be in Green Bay for the draft. Have you been mugged lately? No, Robert. That time in Chicago was the first and only time. Thank goodness. I miss Hyde. Craig, I would say so do the Packers. And I'll tell you what, I'll posit you this about the Micah Hyde situation. I've seen a lot of people saying, well, there wasn't really a spot for him in Green Bay, and it made sense to let him walk. To which I say, I don't think it ever really makes sense to let good players walk. Did he have his limitations? Did he have his, points of weakness? Sure. But he balled out the last month and a half in Green Bay. He got better every single year. He was exemplary off the field, and he was the quintessential draft and develop player. And I'll tell you this, he was playing much better down the stretch last year than HaHa Clinton-Dix. Much better. But HaHa Clinton-Dix got to stick around because he made a Pro Bowl and he was a former first-round pick. Now, obviously, they weren't going to cut HaHa Clinton-Dix, but I would have absolutely brought back Micah Hyde to at least provide some competition, to push him. I mean, and I was saying, you can check the record, Your Honor. You can go back and look. I was saying this last year. HaHa Clinton-Dix, literally the week after he was named to the Pro Bowl last year, his play started to slide. You started to see bad angles. You started to see him giving up easy touchdowns. Major issues in space, winning coverage. That all started immediately after he was named to the Pro Bowl. Meanwhile, Micah Hyde was balling out, getting better every week, saving their bacon both in Chicago and in Dallas. That read against the Cowboys where he intercepts that smoke route to Des Bryant. I mean, that guy was playing the best football of his life, and they let him walk out the door. That makes no sense to me. Meanwhile, Ha Clinton Dix is playing worse and worse and worse, and you pick up his fifth-year option. It just doesn't make any sense to me. It's confusing. It's the only word I'll use there. Will Williams carry the load next year, or will it be a split backfield with Aaron Jones? Ray, I tend to think it'll be split, but it's always going to lean towards Williams until Aaron Jones can really up his game in pass protection. I understand people. I have some colleagues who think, they don't play Aaron Jones enough. They didn't play Aaron Jones enough. He's a better runner. He's a more explosive player, all of which I agree with. But you can't put him out there if he's going to mess up in pass pro every other time. And I'm not saying he does it every other time he's on the field, but he messes up a lot. Enough for it to be noticed and for it to matter and to not gain the trust of the coaches to throw him out there. So until that part of his game is elevated, you're going to see a lot more Jamal Williams than you do Aaron Jones. Now, Brandon Jackson, I tell this story all the time. Brandon Jackson was the absolute worst pass protecting back I have ever seen in my life his rookie year. His first summer in camp into the first part of the season, he was terrible. I mean, terrible. And by the time they won the Super Bowl in 2010, he was one of the best pass protecting backs you'll ever see on an NFL football field. He was so good throughout his career that the Packers brought him back this summer to help Ty Montgomery in his pass protection. That guy was amazing. So it can be taught. You can go from being terrible to being very good. I've seen it done, and there's no better example than Brandon Jackson. So, there's hope for Aaron Jones, who's not terrible. That's the thing. Aaron Jones is nowhere near as bad as Brandon Jackson was when he first started. So there's definitely hope for Aaron Jones in the pass protection realm. All right, everyone. I'm gonna head, but thank you so much for joining me. I'm sorry if I didn't get to your question. As usual, there's tons of them, and you guys are amazing. Doesn't matter when I do. I'm gonna try one at 1 in the morning and see how many people jump on, because there's always 300 or 400 people on here, and it kind of blows me away. But thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me. Make sure you're checking PackersNews.com for all the latest. We'll have it all for you. Tons of great stuff throughout the offseason. And, I'll probably be back tomorrow. Thanks a lot, everyone. Have a good night.